Hey there, K-Korner family. Welcome back to your favorite spot on the most intriguing and jaw-dropping stories around. I'm your host, Crown, and today we've got a lineup of tales that are sure to have you on the edge of your seats. From unbelievable acts of revenge to heartwarming encounters, these stories showcase the wild and unpredictable nature of life. So grab your snacks, settle in, and let's dive right into these incredible narratives. This revenge story happened in the 90s when I was working after school as a line cook slash chef's assistant at a Chinese restaurant. The place specialized in noodle soups, with the main attraction being our soup stock. The owner used a much revered passed down family recipe. It consisted of freshly cracked pork bones, fresh spices, and fresh vegetables, all kept at a rolling boil for over 12 hours. It had to be started the night before, and the owner was very particular about the soup stock. If it ran out, then it ran out. He refused to cheat, as some places do, by adding water or powdered stock and so on. The owner himself was this really awesome old Chinese gentleman. He had some incredible stories. For example, he enlisted into the Kuomintang Chinese Republic Army in the 40s and worked as a chef for KMT officers during World War II. He told us about how one time his division's headquarters was overrun, and he had to escape on a push bike ahead of the advancing Japanese army. Eventually, when the Chinese Communist Party took over in the 50s, he was assigned to a steel factory to work for the rest of his life. He got the hell out and eventually made his way to the US as an asylum seeker. I digress, but my point is that he was an awesome guy and was a genuinely kind and considerate boss. He always made sure his employees were fed before the evening shift and let me study during quiet nights. His son, on the other hand, was a real piece of crap. This guy dropped out of college. His parents saved up for him to study medicine. After 2 years, he floated in and out of jobs but mostly stayed unemployed, living with his parents and using their money into his mid-30s. He eventually started working at the restaurant, nominally as a front-of-the-house manager, but in reality did nothing but watch TV and take naps. While I was only a line cook, the old man and I got along really well. He trusted me to routinely get me to make the soup stock the night before under his supervision. Sadly, the old man died after my 5th year working there, and that's when the son took over. The mother had passed years ago. The son had zero cooking experience but decided to take over as a chef. He didn't like the idea of putting the soup on overnight, waste of gas, and instead got me to do the prep the night before and then would just switch the pot on himself in the morning. He would also routinely add plain water to the soup when it got low, so he could continue selling noodle soup. The most incredible thing, however, was disgustingly, he got the wait staff to throw the customers' unfinished soups back into the stock pot for reuse. When I confronted him about it, he told me that it was no problem, as that he killed any germs and threatened to fire me if I said anything. Not surprisingly, customers started leaving as the food quality degraded. This caused the son to panic and cut even more costs. He fired most of the old staff and thus overworked the remaining. He couldn't fire me because I was the only one left who knew how to do the soup. He also stopped using quality ingredients and started to buy cheap pre-packaged stuff in order to reduce my prep work hours. After a few months of this, I got sick of this crap. As I was about to start college myself, I told him that I was giving him my notice. He of course took this poorly and told me that I was a loser. He told me not to bother coming in tomorrow, but I was to spend the remainder of my shift showing a recent hire on how to do my job, stating that he would not issue my last check if I didn't complete a thorough handover. I laughed in his face and walked out on the spot. I didn't bother chasing up my last check. As a parting gift, I sent an email to our local food safety board informing them of the poor sanitary practice of reusing leftover soups. I helpfully also enclosed a few photos that I had sneakily taken of the practice. The board sent inspectors the very next day and closed the restaurant. There were other issues such as unhygienic bathrooms, uncleaned eating utensils, and he was issued a massive fine and a list of undertakings to carry out before it could be reopened again. The restaurant remained closed and was eventually sold off. I didn't bother chasing up what happened to the son, but I hope he has learned his lesson and done something productive with his life. This happened about 5 years ago and I'm happy I did it. For context, I used to work in a pub for a few years to the point where I was a head barman. I had a manager who was infamous for skipping out on busy days. It was always something like, "Oh, I have a meeting today," or "We are short on this, we need to get more." It wouldn't be so bad, but Pew was also a complete cheapskate and refused to hire the staff we needed. So it was sometime in November that we were expecting a cold winter day, but when I woke up it was sunny and hot. I came in straight away with my manager running to me before we opened, saying about how it was an emergency meeting at the brewery. Not even an hour goes by and the pub is packed. I am left with the head chef and a new trainee barman. Keep in mind this pub was one of the biggest in my town and could easily fit about 300 people inside and 500 in a beer garden. A few hours into service and I'm running a busy bar and a restaurant whilst running the food out and cleaning tables. Whilst the trainee, I felt so bad for him, was sorting out the taps for the customers because at that moment, bills were the only thing my manager trained him to do. Right as we were in the middle of all of this, a huge table of 30 people came in and asked to be seated. Now, trying to balance everything I was doing whilst making this big table happy was a challenge, but we somehow pulled this all off. By the end, I was tired, hungry, and angry at the manager for leaving us like this. The pub was starting to quiet down and people were paying off their taps and leaving. As I finally wipe down and clean the bar, I lean over and start talking to the regulars to cool my mind. And no joke, as soon as the pub got quiet, in strolls my manager with the biggest grin holding a bunch of shopping bags with his girlfriend right behind him. Turns out this meeting was a nice trip to the beach with his girl. He comes to me and goes, "Quiet day. Then if you have time to chat, you have time to clean. Don't be lazy." I was mad. Not only did he leave me practically on my own to serve about 600-ish customers, he has a balls to stroll in to see I'm exhausted and give me crap. I had to think of a way to get him back. Luckily, the table of 30 which came in was getting annoyed at our trainee because he couldn't find the tap. I just hear the women complaining about how long he's taken and they want to leave. So I went to help him out. I basically push him out of the way because I see him struggling and tell him to restock. I look at the till and find a tab something along the lines of 400 pounds. I got an idea. Revenge started. I turn to the women and say in my kindness, most polite customer service voice, "I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience, madam, as it was extremely busy and we seem to have misplaced your tab on a till. But don't worry, I have had a word with the manager and he has told me that for the inconvenience, he will count the bill for you." The woman, obviously happy with this, smiles and says how wonderful this place is and leaves with her group. My manager then walks down and sees him leave and asks if they paid their tab and of course I reply with yes. When it was time to close, I handed in my notice and said goodbye to that crabby place. The fun part, however, is when I returned a week later to say hi to the locals, and surprisingly, it was under new management. When I asked, the locals said that the trainee had gone to the owner about how unfair he was treated and how the manager is rude and unprofessional, and an area manager was sent to confirm if he was doing his job. And surprisingly, when she inspected his records, it seems 400 pounds of stock was not accounted for and he was fired on the spot. This wasn't the first time things have gone missing, so he was already on a thin line. I still go there sometimes. The trainee is now the head barman next in line for manager of his own pub. And he still talks about how he was this close to punching our old manager. The pub went from 2 stars to 4 stars too, so I think in the end, it worked out great. Quick pause, folks. If you're loving these stories, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to K-Korner, and drop a comment below. Your support means the world to us and helps keep this channel thriving. Plus, it's a great way to join our community and share your thoughts on these wild tales. Alright, let's jump back into the action. I, 38 female, am married with 2 children. Twins, Amy and Nina, 6 female. We live in the same town as most of his families in the house I inherited from my grandfather. It's the biggest house in the family, so we often host family gatherings. My husband's youngest sister, Jane, 31 female, has been traveling for work ever since her early 20s. Mid-2022, she moved in with her fiancé about half an hour drive away from us. After that, Jane shows up regularly at family gatherings and rebuilds relationships with her family members. The only thing she never bothers to do is address my daughters by their names. Amy and Nina are identical twins. I understand when people refer to them as the twins, but I think it's important that their individuality is respected. I always tell family and friends that now that they are 6 years old, it's important for them to have their own identity, and if possible, please treat them as individuals rather than a pair or a unit. My girls have different interests and hair/dressing styles, so it's not hard to tell them apart. Jane always insists on calling the girls the twins and makes no effort to distinguish them. I asked her many times to treat them as individuals like her other nieces and nephews, and Jane would say okay and then keep doing the same thing. Last Christmas, Amy made paper cranes and Nina painted flower pictures as their Christmas gifts to everyone in the family. They signed their names and individually handed the gift to everyone. Jane's fiancé had to work this year and did not join us, so after brunch, she video called him in the living room while the rest of us did our things nearby. Her fiancé saw the crane in her hand and asked where she got it, and Jane said, "Oh, one of the twins gave it to me for Christmas. The other twin drew some flowers." I felt this was disrespectful, as my girls put a lot of effort into the gifts and deserve to have their private dedication recognized. When everyone left, I told Jane I expected her to call my girls Amy and Nina from now on, and to treat them like individuals and know their differences. Jane said that she won't bother as my girls are too young, so I told her she's banned from my house until she learns how to address my girls by their names. Jane just stormed off. My husband agreed with me on this. A few days ago, my mother-in-law called to plan my husband's birthday in early February. I told her we could have the party in my house like usual, but Jane would not be invited. My mother-in-law was alarmed and asked why, and when she learned of what happened, she was mad at Jane. Jane called me a few hours ago calling me a jerk for making a big deal out of something so insignificant. She said my girls will be known as the twins whether I like it or not. But once they get older, people will recognize them as individuals, but not now when they are young and just another couple of girls. She said she deserves to be with her family for her brother's birthday, and I need to let it go. Am I the jerk? And now some comments on the post. Someone saying, as a mother of identical twin girls who are now adult, I was very intentional about clearly treating them as individuals while still enjoying the uniqueness of being twins. Creating an environment where they are treated as two separate humans, not a unit, is incredibly important. They have commented more than once how much they appreciated this growing up. Stick to your guns on this. Another commenter goes with, as someone who's a twin, I was constantly referred to as a twins growing up. You're not a jerk. I had so much trouble with finding my own identity when I finished high school especially. My family never referring to me as my own person was the main part of why I struggled with this. These girls need to be given the space to form their own identities. I hate to say, but sister-in-law refusing to even use their names can very much make the girls feel they need to have a shared identity throughout their life. The sooner you nip this, the better. As a twin, I thank you so much for wanting these girls to have their own identity. It's already hard enough having to share everything. They definitely don't need more push on them. I've been reading a lot of Reddit stories lately, so I figured I'd share this story that happened a few months ago. I'm 26 years old and I'm a police officer who normally works the night shift, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. On this particular day, I was in a training class that was scheduled from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Standard uniform attire for classes are the blue polo shirt with department logo on chest and khaki pants. I had my service weapon and badge on the right side of my hip, and my handcuffs, extra magazine, and radio on the left side of my hip. After the class ended, I went to my local supermarket known for low prices and blue shirts to get some things for dinner. While I'm there, a little kid who looked around 9 or 10 years old walked up to me. He asked me, "Are you a police officer?" while pointing to my service weapon. "Yes, I am. I want to be a police officer when I grow up. He says this with much excitement. When I'm in uniform, I always carry around little plastic badges for when I run into kids. So I stood there for a few minutes talking to the kid while his mother was shopping in the aisle. When they go to leave, I give the kid a plastic badge and say, "Here you go, little buddy. You're now a junior officer." He smiled big and gave me a hug. He was so excited and started saying, in a sing-song tune, "I'm a cop, I'm a cop, I'm gonna get all the bad guys." Kid and his mom walk off and I go back to my shopping. I kneel down to look at some chips I'm thinking of getting when I hear someone clear their throat. I turn and see a lady, Karen, who looks to be in her early to mid-40s, glares at me and I go back to looking at the chips. "Excuse me, are you going to help me or not? I need to know, worthy." I cut her off and said, "Ma'am, I don't work here. You'll have to find an employee." "Don't lie to me. You're dressed like an employee. You obviously work here." Now keep in mind I'm not wearing the yellow vest most employees wear. I'm just wearing a blue polo shirt and khakis. I stand up and turn to her, showing my department logo on my shirt and pointing to my badge. "Ma'am, I don't work here. I'm an off-duty officer." I don't understand what went through her mind when she said, "Stop lying. And why do you have a gun? You're not supposed to have a gun while working. Where is your manager?" I sighed. I've dealt with many Karens on duty and I knew where this was going. "Ma'am, I don't work here. My supervisor is Sergeant Dan. I don't work for the store." At this point, Karen looks mad and is staring at me like I'm lying here. Karen then yells, "You lying little jerk. I swear all people your age are just lazy and never want to help anyone. I want your manager now." I again inform her that I don't work for the business. I even pulled out my credentials, which is a photo identification card of me in uniform with a department name and logo and has officer under my photo. It should also be noted that I keep my driver's license and debit card and my credentials since I have to have them on me at all times when I'm in public. Just makes it easier to keep everything together. Karen snatches my credentials out of my hand and stuffs them into her purse and says, "These are fake. I'm taking these and showing them to your manager and the real police." "Ma'am, you have just committed simple robbery, which in my state is the taking of anything of value which is in the immediate control of another with force but not armed with a dangerous weapon. This crime is a felony and punishable by up to 7 years in prison. Return my credentials now or I will be forced to place you under arrest." "You can't arrest me because you're not a cop." I remove my radio from my hip and inform the dispatcher that I need units to my location for a Signal 65 simple robbery. Dispatcher acknowledges and I hear 3 units state they were en route. I place my radio back on my hip and tell Karen she's now being placed under arrest. As I go to grab her left wrist, she slaps me with her right hand saying, "Don't touch me! Help! I am being attacked!" I yell at her, "You have now committed battery on a police officer. Stop resisting or you will go to the ground." I notice people are now forming, wondering what was going on. I hear on the radio that the units are on scene and asking for my location. I press the radio button and give them my aisle. A few moments later, 3 fully uniformed officers show up. Officer 1, 2, and 3. Officer 1 asks me what happened. I give him the rundown, while Karen is spewing all sorts of lies of how I threatened her with my gun and how I had attacked her to Officer 2. Officers 1 and 2 stay with us, while Officer 3 goes to the security office to play back the cameras. While waiting on Officer 3, I am chit-chatting with the other 2 officers. I went through the police academy with one of them. We hear Officer 3 saying over the radio to the other 2 officers to 10, 15 Karen, which means place her in handcuffs and arrest her. The 2 officers do so, and they are placing her in handcuffs and reading her Miranda rights, and she starts struggling and saying that she's innocent and that they should arrest me for pretending to be a cop and attacking her. Officer 1 tells her, "Lady, we have you on video. You've been lying to us this whole time. You are under arrest for simple robbery, battery on a police officer, disturbing the peace, and now resisting arrest. You have the right to remain silent. I highly suggest you use it." Another officer tells her. The 3rd officer walks up to us with a copy of the camera footage, and all 3 walk Karen to the back seat of Officer 1's car. I spend the next few minutes explaining to the sergeant on duty who showed up about what happened. filling out a statement of the incident, and having photographs taken. The photographs are standard procedure whenever we arrest someone for battery on a police officer. Once everything is said and done, my credentials are returned to me. Karen is taken to jail, and I go home. I am never stopping a bad business again when I'm wearing my training class uniform. Update: the ADA asked if I would drop the simple robbery charge to a misdemeanor theft, which is up to 6 months in jail. Figuring this lady has no previous record, I agreed to it. They also dropped the disturbing the peace charge and the misdemeanor battery of a police officer charge due to no injuries. Can't really object, but hey, it is what it is, so now she's facing up to a year in jail. And that's a wrap on today's episode of K-Korner. I hope these stories left you amazed, inspired, or maybe even a little more knowledgeable about the quirky side of life. Remember, life is full of surprises, and who knows, maybe one day your story will be featured here. Until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and as always, keep spreading those positive vibes. This is Crown, signing off.